What's the big idea? Sabrina demanded. Is this one of your stupid pranks? I declared war on you, remember? Puck said. You contaminated me with your puberty virus and you called my villainy into question. First of all, puberty isn't a virus, Sabrina said as she played tug of war with the Pegasus for her now rather damp pillow. Second of all, I'm sorry if I gave the itty bitty baby the boo-boo face. Puck curled his lip in anger. Oh, now the baby is cranky, Sabrina taunted. Perhaps we should put him down for a nap? We'll see who's laughing soon enough, Puck said. You see these flying horses? Duh! They have a very special diet. For the last 2 days, they have eaten nothing but chili dogs and prune juice. Sabrina heard a rumble coming from the horse. It was so loud it drowned out the sound of its beating wings. It whined a bit, and its eyes bulged nervously. Puck continued. Now, chili dogs and prune juice are a nasty combination. They can keep a human being on the toilet for a week. Imagine what would happen if I fed chili dogs and prune juice to a 550-pound flying horse. Oh, wait a minute. You don't have to imagine it. Puck's Pegasus let out a tremendous fart and then whined again. The horror of Puck's plan sank in, and Sabrina panicked. She looked up at the fleeing horses and wondered if there was anything she could do to save herself. But she couldn't think of anything. She heard a splat on the floor several yards away and quickly averted her eyes, but there was no escaping the smell. She feared it might never go away. A second splat followed, and Sabrina scampered to her feet. The only strategy she realized was to stay mobile. She leaped out of the way just before a third horrible brown bomb crashed near her foot. But she found herself directly below another Pegasus about to blow. She rolled out of the way and collided with her sister. Gee, Sabrina, you should go see Nurse Pratt, Daphne said, pinching her nose. That's not me, she cried. We're under attack. Get up and save yourself. Daphne gaped, unsure of what was happening. But when her sleeping bag suffered a direct hit, she dove to safety. In her efforts to escape the next attack, she knocked Sabrina down and the two flailed like a couple of desperate fish in the bottom of a boat. There's nowhere to run, Puck shouted to the girls, and I'm not taking any prisoners. He laughed so hard it echoed off the ceiling of the Hall of Wonders. Another bomb fell with disgusting splat. Is it on me? Daphne cried, flipping her head back and forth. She calmed down when Sabrina assured her she had not been caught in the spray. The commotion finally roused Granny Rhoda. Puck, you cut this nonsense out at once, she demanded, her shouts waking Henry and Veronica. Forget it, old lady. I'm done doing what I'm told, he shouted, steering his horse so that it flew uncomfortably close to the old woman. A splat landed mere inches from her feet, and she gasped in horror. She turned to Sabrina and gave her an impatient look. What did you say to him? She asked. Sabrina was shocked. Why is it always me? Because you're the only one who can get under his skin, Granny said. You've obviously hurt his feelings. He's very sensitive. Sensitive? This kid hasn't brushed his teeth since the Civil War, and suddenly he cares about my opinion? Sabrina asked. Why does he care so much about what Sabrina thinks? Henry asked suspiciously. Sabrina blushed and looked to the floor. You've got your first boyfriend, Veronica exclaimed, clapping her hands happily. Ugh, Henry complained. I'm so not ready for this. Couldn't you have at least picked a boy who smells a little better? I didn't pick anyone, Dad. I don't like him, she cried. Daphne grinned. Whatever. Sabrina apologized to him before this gets out of hand. Granny begged. Mom, this is already out of hand, Henry said, shielding himself and his wife with a sleeping bag. He shook a commanding finger at Puck. Now you listen to me, boy. This is unacceptable. You come down here and start acting your age. Honey, he's over 4,000 years old, Veronica said, cowering under the sleeping bag. Well then, this is even more immature, Henry said. Puck sailed over Sabrina's head. I should thank you. You actually did me a favor. Oh yeah? Sabrina said suspiciously. I'd gotten too comfortable living in the old lady's house, eating the old lady's food, acting like a human. I am the trickster king, the crown prince of snips and snails and puppy dog tales, the ruler of gremlins, rascals, and miscreants, the guiding light of every instigator, agitator, and knave from here to Wonderland. I shouldn't be living with a bunch of heroes like you and your family. I should be causing the chaos you are trying to prevent. I am, after all, a first-rate villain. Fine, go be a villain, Sabrina shouted. But don't you think this is all a little overdramatic? Flying horses, poop bombs. Actually, I think it's just dramatic enough, Puck said. Charge! There was little the Grimms could do. They ran around the Hall of Wonders in circles, shrieking. Eventually, Mirror appeared, and despite his desperate cries and a very impressive bribe, the boy and his chili dog-eating horses would not relent. Puck chased Sabrina until she tumbled over her own feet and fell. Helpless, she lay on the floor as the Pegasi drifted directly above her. Would saying I'm sorry make a difference? Sabrina asked. Puck cackled. Like a lot of people who have lived through nightmarish things, Sabrina's brain mercifully blocked what happened next from her memory. She wouldn't remember being carried across the fort, where soldiers tossed bucket after bucket of soapy water on her until she was finally clean. She wouldn't remember how her family wrapped her in towels and carried her to a cot, where an elf sprayed her with several cans of air freshener. She wouldn't remember how her mother sang to her and fed her soup, or that she slept for nearly 23 hours after the ordeal. It was good that she didn't remember, but those who witnessed it would be haunted by it for the rest of their lives. Daphne said she would never look at ponies, or chili dogs for that matter, the same way again. Sabrina did remember, however, her first glimpse of the saboteur. Once she had been hit, Sabrina had fled into the room of reflections, through the Hotel of Wonders, and out into the courtyard. Her family and friends followed, chased by Puck and his pooping Pegasi. Sabrina was racing toward the mess tent for cover when there was a terrible explosion from across the fortress. The newly built water tower suddenly caught fire and toppled over. It slammed into the ground and cracked open like a coconut, spilling hundreds of gallons of water into the courtyard. Everyone there was swept away by the flood and dragged nearly to the other end of the camp before they regained control of themselves. Sabrina scampered to her feet to help others when she saw a shadow dart away from the water tower. She couldn't see who it was, but she saw where he went. Daphne saw too. I'll be right back, Daphne said, racing after the saboteur. Daphne, no! Sabrina cried, but the little girl ignored her. She rushed after her sister. Daphne was fast, and Sabrina strained to keep up. She eventually lost her in the maze of equipment and the obstacle course, but when she heard Daphne shouting, she turned toward the noise and ran. She found her sister standing before the high fort wall with her hands on her hips. Where is he? Sabrina asked. He either went over the wall, Daphne pointed at the top, 15 feet overhead, or through that hole. Sabrina spotted a small opening at the base of the wall where a portion of the timber had rotted. No normal-sized person could have crawled through it, at least not a human person. It was too small for even a child. Sabrina scowled. Whether the villain flew out or had the ability to shrink himself, it didn't matter. He was gone. Charming appeared to supervise the cleanup. A small handful of Everafters came out of their tents to investigate, but he liked them. "Just a design flaw, people. Let's get it cleaned up," he told the gathering crowd, but when they drifted away, he turned to the girls. "You saw something, didn't you?" "He was small and fast," Daphne said. "He got away." Charming frowned and walked away. Daphne looked down at herself. She was soaked from head to toe. On the bright side, now we both need a bath. Days passed, and in that time, the refugees became near experts on many of the magical items, including the flying carpet. Morgan Le Fay worked closely with Mr. Seven, and soon the two of them could mount the unicorns with little trouble. Mr. Borman and Mr. Swinehart kept busy designing and rebuilding a new water tower. They made various upgrades to the camp, including a deep moat around the perimeter, a new and bigger medical tent, and 2 more massive catapults, each loaded with boulders as big as a car. But the 2 little pigs were most proud of their high-pressure water cannons they attached to the watchtowers. They would help fend off dragons if any happened to attack. The biggest change, however, was in the mood of the recruits. Gone were the frightened refugees eager to avoid confrontation. Briar's death and all their training had transformed them into a determined bunch. They were itching for a fight with the Scarlet Hand. With each passing hour, they became a real army, and the camp became an imposing fortress. Sabrina should have been proud of their community, but as things changed around her, they became eerily familiar. The fortress she and Daphne had visited and Ferryport Landing's dark future seemed to spring up around her. Some things were different. For example, Snow White was still alive, and Granny Rhoda wasn't planning missions. But there were moments when Sabrina was sure she had stepped through a hole in time again. She worried that charming Daphne and her own efforts to change the future were not enough to avoid the disastrous destiny. The family sat down in the mess tent for a breakfast of oatmeal and wild berries, eggs, and juice. Everyone she cared about was there, even Uncle Jake, though he just picked at his food listlessly. The only person missing was Puck, which was fine by Sabrina. He swore his war with her was not over. She counted her lucky stars that he wasn't hovering over her, preparing to ruin her meal with some disgusting prank. Relieved, she scooped up a big spoonful of oatmeal, but after the first bite, she felt something pop inside her mouth. She didn't think much of it until she noticed her mother staring at her in shock. "What?" "Oh my," her father said. "Mom, what's in this oatmeal?" "It's just oatmeal," the old woman promised. Sabrina looked at her hands. They were a shade of murky green. Uncle Jake took her hand in his own and flipped it over. Puck. It was all the explanation she needed. Sabrina leaped up from her seat and ran to Charming's cabin. She needed to see herself in one of the mirrors. When she did, she let out a shriek. Her face, hands, feet, and even her ears were swampy green. She looked like a frog. Reggie's face appeared in his mirror. "Girl, you look like you were wrestling with a bunch." That seems to be the end of this video. I'll send more later. Goodbye.